All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Sarah Rathbun. If you don't already know me, I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications here at Dry Creek Vineyard, and we are incredibly excited today to partner with one of our favorite companies, Volo Chocolate. Just a couple housekeeping things like usual from me. We're going to have everybody muted to begin with. We want to just make sure that we can let Kim and Jeff and Susan and Robert really kind of share what's going on without too much background interference. So we're just going to ask everyone to stay muted. Use the chat button down at the bottom is a great way to be able to ask questions, and we love the questions. I'll be kind of filtering them through and passing them off to Kim and to Jeff and Susan. So please ask your questions there. You could also try to kind of wave your hand as well and see if there's, something very exciting that you want to tell us. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Kim to get started, and I hope you all enjoy this as much as I'm looking forward to this. And then Jeff and Susan, really quick, I had to mute you again real quick, so unmute yourselves and then you'll be good to go.
Well, hi everybody. I am telling you, this is exciting. I'm just staring at all these squares of all these wonderful people that I love, and I feel just so grateful that you're all here. I see Linda and Vince, and hi Sandra, hi Paul, hi Deb, Matt. Let's see, there's Lee, Eugenia. Oh, I see the Davenports, and this is really, really fun. Anyway, I am just so happy that we're all here together. This is one of those tastings that everybody here has been excited about, and it's going to be an eye-opening one, I think, not only for you but also for me, because I have a little secret to tell you. Don't tell anybody. Here's my secret. I never was a big fan of red wine with chocolate. I have seen the light thanks to Jeff and Susan. So I hope all of you have the same wonderful experience that we have had with their chocolates. I want to quickly make sure everybody knows Robert Kennard. Robert, wave your hand. Robert is our Director of Hospitality up top there. And Robert, ironically, he looks like he's in the cellar. He's not. He's in his office. I'm actually in the corner of the cellar, set up. If any of you have been to the barrel room for one of our tastings, I'm right in the cellar here. And I've got the blanket on my lap, and I just put my sweater on, so hopefully I'll stay nice and warm. And anyway, so what I want to do before I turn it over to Jeff and Susan is, just in case you haven't heard, this is a family-owned winery. We're in our 49th harvest. Can you believe it? Just a very short time away from our 50th anniversary. And of course, the winery was started by my parents in 1972. And all these years later, here I am getting to taste wine and chocolate with all of our beloved wine club members and friends. Anyway, it's been an extraordinary almost 5 decades. But one of the things that we decided to do today was to focus not on Zinfandel with chocolate, which is probably what you assumed we would do, but to actually focus on the Bordeaux varietals. And of course, you probably know that we are passionate about the Bordeaux varietals and have advocated for not only the art of Bordeaux blending, but certainly Bordeaux varietals here in Dry Creek Valley since the very beginning, since when Dad started the winery. So it made a lot of sense to us to really focus on Cabernet and Meritage type wines for this particular tasting. I also thought, just before we get into the tasting, that you might be curious to hear a little bit about harvest. Anybody curious about harvest? Because we are in the middle of harvest, full swing in the middle of harvest. And so far, so good. It is definitely not without its challenges, but here's just a quick overview. So we've brought in all of our white wines, the Chenin, all of the Sauvignon Blancs, and of course our Chardonnay. And the wines are really aromatic, and I know Tim is really excited about them. I've had the opportunity to stick my nose in a few of them and smell some amazing just beautiful fruit tones coming out of the Sauvignon Blancs and the Chenins and the whites. We've completed picking our Merlot, and we're into the Zinfandels now, and we have yet to, of course, begin Cabernet, but that'll be coming up next. Zinfandel as well is showing some really nice, deep, dark brooding colors and fruit tones, and overall seems to be really shaping up to be really nice. We have had to reject a few vineyards because of smoke taint, but it's just way too early to really say what the impact will be on the overall, result. But we're being extremely discerning, extremely discerning. What we're doing is basically picking every single vineyard and creating what's called a micro ferment, which is a 5-gallon bucket where Tim adds yeast and literally ferments the wine, and we make a little mini batch of wine, if you will, and that is sent to a lab to test. And so we've tested every single vineyard, and as I say, so far so good. We've had to reject a few, but overall we're feeling pretty darn optimistic. So knock on wood, knock on barrels over there, knock on your tabletop or wherever you are, that continues. So anyway, I just wanted to give you kind of a little overview, and the weather's been beautiful. It's clear. The skies are blue, the smoke is long gone, thankfully, and hopefully will not return. So that's my little harvest update. Okay, and now for the real stars of the show, I want to introduce Jeff and Susan Mull. Jeff and Susan, will you just wave your hands? All right, so I fell in love with these folks. I know Robert has fallen in love with them, and of course we sell their chocolates here in the tasting room. They are just the most adorable couple, and their passion and their enthusiasm is just infectious. Real quickly about their background. How many of you ever went to the restaurant in Healdsburg called Zinn? Raise your hands. Anybody know the restaurant Zinn? So Zinn was one of the staples here in Healdsburg for many, many years. They started it and owned it for 16 years and sold it in, I think it was 2014. I think, is that right, Jeff? And did probably what a lot of us wish we could do, which is they just hightailed it out of here, followed their heart's desire, and they actually ended up in Baja, Mexico, and worked as chefs for a small boutique hotel. And I think they didn't expect to stay forever, but they got their feet wet and they cleared their heads from being business owners, but they also discovered cocoa beans. And I'm going to let Jeff tell the rest of the story, but after their discovery of cocoa beans, they became absolutely passionate about it and eventually came back to Healdsburg and started Volo chocolate. And I think we might have been one of their very first customers. So it's a wonderful story. And one of the things that Jeff and Susan are going to do, which they've done with us, is teach us all how to taste chocolate. So I found that very exciting and very fun. And so I'm going to sort of turn it over now to Jeff and Susan to tell not only their story, but teach us a little bit about chocolate tastings, and then we'll get into the actual tasting.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. So, so we had Zinn Restaurant in Healdsburg for just shy of 16 years. And, one of the things that we did at Zinn was we were all about homegrown and homemade. We had our own farm. We grew produce 3 seasons a year. We were beekeepers. We raised chickens for eggs. We baked all of our own bread in-house. We did all of our own bacon and, sausage and smoked, everything we could do homemade, we did. So when we decided to go to Mexico and, kind of just get away, but still work, we still had that mentality with us. And one of the things about living in Mexico is that, you don't have a lot of the conveniences that you have here. But we knew that kind of doing a version of, cooking a version of Baja fresh, that's a restaurant, Baja style Mexican food. In Mexico, we wanted to make our own corn tortillas. We wanted to do as much from scratch as we did at Zinn. So one of the things that we brought with us was a grinder specifically to grind corn for corn tortillas, because we were taking corn tortillas from growing the corn to drying the corn to nixtamalizing the corn to making tortillas. So we had the specialized grinder. Thing is that the tortillas didn't ever really turn out that great. So one of the things that
I'm gonna interject. So when we went into the kitchen, there were some ingredients that were there from the previous chef. And Jeff and I were so excited. We're both chefs. And we got to see it. Oh my God, that is what cocoa beans look like. And Jeff turned to me and asked that fateful question of, I wonder how hard it is to make chocolate. And I thought, oh God, here we go. So that's how it all began, that one question.
Yeah, so anyway, we found cocoa beans, and 30 years of cooking and being in restaurants, I'd never seen a cocoa bean in my life. So it was kind of a learning experience, figuring out how to work with them. But we worked with some great people at the hotel who came from other parts of Mexico where their families made very rustic Mexican style chocolate. And we kind of, with them and, a lot of experimenting and research and trial and error, we came up with chocolate that we liked and that we were able to keep refining, and every batch got better than the last one.
And the thing is, with us being chefs, the very first batch that we did, we just kind of winged it. We knew that what the basic ingredients were and what kind of sugar proportion we wanted to use. And we made a batch and thought, oh, that's pretty good. So the next time we thought, well, I wonder what would happen if we actually followed the directions. And so we were roasting it at 700 degrees in a wood-burning pizza oven. So we went and found a recipe and a guideline for doing it in the oven. And we roasted it, and we made the chocolate, and it was awful. And we did it again, and it was awful again. And I looked at Jeff and I said, honey, the people that are doing this, they were like lawyers and put together tech stuff. And you and I are chefs. In our gut, we know how to coax flavors out of ingredients. So let's just follow our instincts and go for it. And we did.
And you had never made chocolate before, because you both, I forgot to mention everybody, both Jeff and Susan have professional culinary training at the CIA and the Culinary Institute, not only at Hyde Park, New York, but also in San Francisco. And of course, they worked at some of the top restaurants in the Bay Area in San Francisco that I'm sure many of you have been to. But over that period of time, you never really made chocolate?
Never, no. It was brand new to us.
Wow. Well, so tell us about the whole, I found it really interesting learning about how chocolate is made. And I know that you've got some fun photos that you shared with us that we would like to share as well.
So we had the opportunity soon after we got back from Mexico. We found a wonderful supplier for cocoa beans, and they let us know that they were going to be taking a trip to Guatemala, and did we want to go with other chocolate makers? And there we go. That's us in hot, sticky, sweaty, wonderful, gorgeous Guatemala.
Wow.
Yeah, so the thing with cacao is related to coffee, and you can grow cacao. That's what it's called when it's on the tree and in the bean form. That's actually what the rest of the world calls it, except for America. We call it cocoa. But cacao grows 20 degrees north and south of the equator all around the world. So you can grow cacao in Latin America, South America, the Caribbean. And by the way, that's a pod of the cacao tree with those white seeds are the cocoa beans before they are fermented and dried. So that's fresh right at harvest.
So Jeff, I have a quick question. On the tree, the cacao pods look kind of like a sort of a purpley red color, but in his hand, it's a different color. It's more of like a yellow and red. Is that because the ones on the tree aren't ripe yet? It's
very strange plants. So they can be all different colors on the tree, but they're also a fruit that doesn't grow like a normal fruit on the tree. It grows out of the trunk. It grows out of the side. It's not like a branch that'll, blossom and then put out, fruit. It literally is this Martian-looking tree with pods just sticking out of it everywhere. And they can be different colors.
Generally, on the same tree, it can be different colors.
Yeah, so it's pretty pretty amazing.
And then the beans are inside that pod, right?
Yes.
So how many beans are in a pod?
There's about, it depends on the variety, but there's about 80 beans in a pod.
80?
Yeah.
Wow.
Between 50 and 80, but generally for the pods for the source that we use, there's probably more like around 80. It's between 75 and 80 per pod.
Huh.
We didn't realize, I always wondered, how do they know when they're ready to pick?
Exactly.
And we were shocked. They use a refractometer.
Just like here.
Just
Oh my gosh. So what, are they testing sugar?
yes.
Yeah.
They test it. They want it to be between 16 and 21 bricks.
Oh, that is so fascinating. Well, about probably 10 bricks less than maybe Zinfandel, which will pick around 26, maybe degrees, 27. How fun.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are actually a lot of parallels between growing cacao and growing grapes, and also making chocolate and making wine. So
Is there only one harvest per year?
there's actually 2 harvests per year. So they get 2 seasons, and it's generally at the end of a rainy season in the spring, and also the second kind of rainy season in the fall. But they get 2 harvests per year. Once the cacao has been picked, or the pods, they get cracked open like in the picture that you saw. And then all of the pulp gets drained, and there's this really sweet, fruity nectar or juice that comes from just the fruit when it's been cracked open. They drain that away, and then all of the seeds or the beans get fermented. They go through a full fermentation process. And that's the fermentation that really builds the flavor of the chocolate. And if the fermentation is not done correctly, you can't make good chocolate. I mean, it's really about the fermentation, and then after that, the drying. And once it's been fermented and dried, then we get the beans. And I know this will probably be a very tiny picture, but these are our cocoa beans, right? You know, how we get them in a big bag. And
we've got a gorgeous picture of those beans.
There they are. So once they're dried in Guatemala, or we also use cacao from Haiti, they go into a big burlap sack. They go on a freighter. They go to the East Coast, and then they eventually make their way here to us in Sonoma County.
Something else. Well, should we get into the wine tasting part or the chocolate tasting part?
There's one more piece that we'd love to show you.
Please, please, please.
That's the ingenuity of a chocolate maker, and thank God he's like a magical engineer of these things. We've had to build most of our own equipment because no equipment exists for small growers. Yeah, so this is our winnower.
And so
what'd you call it?
So this is a winnower. So after we've roasted, so once we get the beans, we have to roast them, and it's kind of like roasting coffee, whereas as opposed to like baking bread, we need over a period of 20 minutes to roast these beans and adjust the temperature so that it goes through a curve in a roasting profile. And then we need to crush and shell the beans, or they get crushed, and then we need to remove the hull. So we crush and winnow. And that's what this contraption does right here. We dump all the roasted beans into this grape harvest bin that I bought at Garrett's.
Yeah, I'm going to show the video. It's going to be a little bit loud, so you're not going to be able to talk over it, but I'll show it here real quick.
So this will give you an idea, and I'll kind of explain at the end better about what it does. But so what's happening is that the beans are going into the bin. Then they're going through a crusher. Basically, they're like a juicer, or the Champion type juicer. The juicer crushes everything together, and then it falls down through PVC pipe. And a shop vac is at the same time pulling a vacuum, sucking away the lighter weight hull. And the nibs, which are the bases of our chocolate, fall into a bucket. And so this is all constructed with a grape bin, a PVC pipe, a shop vac, and 2 Champion juicers. So, and that's what we, up until about 10 years ago, or actually 15 years ago, there were 0 chocolate makers, small chocolate makers. You could do something by hand, but it took a lot of, and this is why there's a lot of engineers that make chocolate, because they had to figure out these machines or how to hack other things to build a machinery that was needed to produce chocolate. So This is the crusher and winnower that most small chocolate makers build themselves in order to do this.
And
That's
it's,
why the Swiss are good at chocolate making.
What's that, Kim?
I guess that's why the Swiss are typically good chocolatiers, right? Because they've got that engineering
Yes.
streak.
Yeah.
I'm second generation American from Switzerland.
There you go.
So, real quick, Jeff, so did I hear Susan right? Did you invent that machine or did you copy it?
I refined it. So there's a guy that's an engine, the main guy that kind of created all these machines and then put all the information out there for lots of other chocolate makers to use. He came up with a basic design, but I kind of super modified it. I added a second motor to it, and then I added another air system to help with the winnowing. So the basic design was there. I just kind of did my own thing to help it along a little bit.
All right. Well, I see some thirsty and probably hungry people. I know I am. So maybe we should start tasting. And
I think Jeff and Susan, we're going to talk about how to taste the chocolate before we get started, right, Jeff and Susan?
So Susan's going to go through, like wine tasting, there's a whole process to chocolate tasting. And so she's going to do the demo on that.
Can everybody see me? Yes, no, yes, okay.
Yeah.
Unwrapped it. This is the deep dark, 73%. So I'm gonna get a square, and to bring out the flavors, you wanna warm it up and you rub it between your fingers, and then you smell. And then you're gonna go ahead and take a bite. Then float it around on your tongue to hit all your little taste bud areas. And then close your eyes and let it melt and get all those wonderful flavors.
Your hands smell good after that too.
And what's so great about these beans, they're known to be fudgy. They're known also to have hints of dried fruit, dried berries, which is amazing because the tasting notes from the wines, almost all of them mention cherry and berry, and which really lends this to be a great pairing chocolate.
Yeah. And this is made with cacao from Guatemala. So that picture that you saw earlier, these beans were from right there. And just everybody, in case people don't know the label, when you see the percentage on the label, and this one being 73, that's the darkest, the percentage tells you how much of that bar came from the cocoa bean. So if it's a pure chocolate where there's only sugar and cocoa or cacao, you would know then that it's 73% cacao and about 27% sugar. The lower percentages, more milk chocolate, you will at least know that that 62% is our dark milk chocolate. The rest of it is divided between sugar and milk and butter.
Okay.
And to let you know how great of a difference there is between our chocolate and others, Hershey bars, Hershey milk chocolate, 11% chocolate.
Oh, wow.
Crazy.
So.
Wow. Oh gosh, well that's a good thing to remember, everybody. Well, okay, so so I think what we should do now, Jeff, is we'll just get into the tasting. And what we decided, everybody, is, and actually we had a really fun tasting here at the winery that I think Robert will be able to speak to. But one of the wines that just absolutely sung with these chocolates was our Merlot. And so while they're starting with their deepest, darkest chocolate, right, the 73%, we chose to start the tasting with our 2017 Merlot. So it's a little bit of an unusual maybe decision, but hopefully you'll see why when you taste the two together. So go ahead and start drinking the Merlot. Just a little bit of background on our Merlot. So we've actually made Merlot every single year since 1974. When Dad started the winery, of course, in 72, he made the white wines. In 73, he added Zinfandel and Cabernet, and then it was in 74 that he added our Merlot. And so we produce it every year. We produce it a little bit to blend, to bottle on its own, which is what we're tasting here. And then we also produce Merlot for blending with our other Bordeaux varietals. This is what the original label, which we around here affectionately refer to as the retro label. One of the things that you should notice as you're looking at this label, it's fun to look at the alcohol, 12.8%. And that shows you how things have changed a little bit over the years. But in any event, so this Merlot is actually in keeping with our style of winemaking, is very classically a Bordeaux blend. So it's 79% Merlot, 9% Cabernet Franc, 5% Malbec, 5% Petit Verdot, and I think 2% Petit Verdot, and 8% Cabernet Sauvignon. But what's distinctive about it is the Cabernet Franc that is in this wine, of course, is our DCV6 Estate Cabernet Franc, and it's a pretty bold, just a beautiful Cabernet Franc. It's unlike any Cabernet Francs that I've ever tasted, and I know Tim says it's the best Cabernet Franc he's ever worked with. So hence, this Merlot is a fairly bold, ripe style of Merlot, a little bit fuller bodied. You know, it has that wonderful black cherry, kind of cranberry fruit tones, maybe a little black currant. There's a little subtle, almost a bay leaf. There's a spicy kind of bay leaf component in here. And I would hazard to guess that that's coming from our Cabernet Franc, which is an absolutely beautiful vineyard. But when you swirl this, I don't know if you all get this, but I do get just a sort of a hint of, I don't want to say chocolate, I would say maybe more of a mocha kind of chocolate, mocha, you know, kind of a, I don't know, kind of very subtle, of course, but it seemed just like it would be a natural with this chocolate, which is actually how I think Robert, you were the one that kind of was like Mr. Merlot with the deep dark chocolate, right?
Yeah, so just acknowledging, you know, having to do the really tough work and do the homework to do these tastings. We originally started with the idea, you touched on it, about Zinfandel, that Zinfandel would be a fantastic pairing. And as we started tasting through stuff, we actually found that the Zins were pairing way better with the Salumis and things like that we're going to do later with Journeyman because of the spice and everything. And that the chocolates, to Susan's point earlier, those fruit notes, that red berry and those cherry and blackberry kind of notes were kind of really singing through with the chocolates. And we very quickly landed in the world of our Bordeaux blends and our varietal Bordeaux. And it was a really fun homework tasting that we did because nobody really agreed exactly. Everybody had different opinions on what chocolate. We all agreed that they went really well together, but everybody had different favorites. And there's one chocolate that we'll get to later in the tasting that, you know, you talk about preconceived notions and you talk about, like, you go into things like, oh, I'm positive this is going to pair well with this. I was positive that one of these chocolates wasn't going to go well with anything, and it ended up being absolutely one of my favorites that I thought paired well with the wines across the board. So, yeah.
What do you guys think, Susan and Jeff? Are you tasting these two together?
So you know, it's great. This our deep dark chocolate is, you know, made with this Guatemalan cacao, and truly the notes in our tasting notes for this bar is cherry. I mean, we look at the cherry flavor that comes, that's just inherent in this bean. And kind of like wine, cacao can have a vintage. You know, it could be a drier season that could, you know, impact flavor. It could be a super wet, rainy season. But one of the things that you'll get is this Guatemalan cacao from La Chua will always have a note of cherry. Now, some years it can be a dried cherry. It can be a really intense, you know, bottled up cherry flavor. And then other years it can be this really bright, you know, ripe cherry flavor. So I love that, you know, this wine can also mimic some of those notes, even with the black cherry and the cranberry.
So it's so interesting to me that it's vintage specific. I'm just sitting here thinking about it, because one of the things that's kind of fun about all four of these wines is they're all 2017 vintage. So 2017, if you're not from the area, Well, the wines have turned out beautifully, but it was an interesting vintage because first of all, we had the floods in the winter, which ended basically a 5-year drought here. So they were very welcomed unless you had a house in the flood zone, which unfortunately we have an employee here who had a house in the flood zone. Many of you know him, Ian, our tasting room manager. But having said that, the rains were, pretty significant in the winter time, and then spring was actually fairly mild and fairly typical, and then we had a huge, and I mean huge, heat spell at the end of August, or actually I think it was the very early part of September, and it was quite hot, exceedingly hot for just a couple of days. And of course that just really compacted harvest. That was a crazy harvest. There was a lot of frantic picking. And then, of course, in October, at the end of October, we had the October wildfires. But at that point, we had pretty much harvested everything, so it really didn't have an impact on the fruit. But overall, for me, the 2017s are quite voluptuous and quite, fruit forward and fairly developed, and as opposed to more of a linear or leaner vintage. And I just find it so interesting that that the cacao bean, as I now know how to say it, has a similar kind of vintage, variation. Anyway, okay, so let's tell us about the next, I just wanted to tell everybody, we weren't necessarily trying to say that this chocolate goes with this wine. It was more about trying different wines with different chocolates. So you have more chocolate than you do wine. So I don't know which chocolate you want to speak about next, though.
So next.
Jeff, we actually did have one question, if I could just jump in really quick. Is Andrew and Christy were wondering, how many different regions do you use in your chocolate?
So we use 2 regions. We use Lachua, Guatemala, where the cacao is known for its bright, cherry flavor, whether it's the dried or the fresh. And we kind of call it the red fruit flavors. We also use beans from Haiti. And now Haiti beans are more noted for their toasted nuts, roasted coffee flavor. So we make a different kind of chocolate using those beans from Haiti.
We've tried beans from all over the world and come back to the ones that taste the best to us. We like that fudgy flavor. We like that rich, full. There's some that actually are so bright and almost lemony that it's strange. They're from Madagascar. They're just this bright chocolate.
Yeah. So we literally tasted probably between 17 and 20 bean varieties from different locales before settling on these 2 that we really liked. Bolivian cacao that we tried was like the definition of just pure fudge and chocolate. Not a lot of exciting stuff happening in it. Not a lot of like fruit or roasted nuts like that we like in the Haiti or the Guatemalan, but just nothing but chocolate, which is great for certain things. But for what we like to do, being chefs, we stick with our Guatemalan and our Haitian. Yeah.
That's great. Well, what do you guys suggest we try next then, Jeff and Susan?
Let's go for the almond. It's a dark milk chocolate with roasted almonds that have been roasted in extra virgin olive oil. And the other amazing thing, it is a dark milk chocolate. The milk has been caramelized and there's brown butter in it. So we have made these very deep, rich flavors, and into that put the almonds. And with all of those, the roasted nut really, I think, lends itself quite well to the wines.
So that's the 62% dark milk chocolate?
Yeah.
And when you say you've caramelized the milk, are you talking about you're literally stirring it in a pan? I mean, tell us what that means.
So when you make chocolate and you have milk chocolate, you can never make it with fresh milk. It always has to be milk in a dry form, so like a powdered milk. So we're taking that powdered milk, and we're taking some of it and mixing it with butter, and we're cooking the butter down to make browned butter.
Kind of like a roux.
Yeah, kind of like a roux. And then we're also taking the rest of the milk, and we're actually cooking that in a low heated oven so that it caramelizes and browns. and you're generating these really toasty, rich, deep, what I think of as fall notes into it.
Oh my gosh. And you said fondle the chocolate, right? Isn't that what you said? Fondle the chocolate and then take a little bite?
Rub it to bring out the smell. And
Oh my God. I've never smelled my chocolate. Has anybody ever smelled their chocolate? This is new for me. Oh, good for you.
And this bar is made with cacao from Haiti. Now, so you've tried the Guatemalan. Now this is our Haitian.
Jeff, could you really quickly speak to some of the other, I just think it's a cool Sonoma County story. Obviously the chocolate comes from different places, but the other ingredients that you use in your chocolate bars, the figs and the milk and the butter and all that stuff, where does that sort of stuff come from?
So, so like you said, Robert, the two main ingredients for chocolate, sugar and cacao, come from the equator. So you can't be really totally about local on those issues, but everything, or those ingredients, but everywhere else you can. So we use milk from Petaluma Creamery here in Sonoma County. We use butter from Clover Dairy, also in Sonoma County. The almonds that are in this chocolate come from family friends that go back with my family 3 generations, California almond farmers. Sonoma County olive oil. I mean, if it's the inclusions, and that's what we call everything that we add to the chocolate. We're all about making this as local as possible. Figs from Fresno, and yeah.
And we even have the printing done here in Sonoma County.
Yeah, we try to, like we've always done with Zen before this, was, be about Sonoma County as much as we can.
I just had a great idea for a collaboration. So Don, my husband, planted almond trees at the end of our driveway. We have, oh my gosh, how many do we have, you guys? Probably 20, 25?
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe we should do a Dry Creek chocolate with a Volo chocolate with Don's almonds.
That sounds great.
Yeah, we could easily do that, or we could also create some just chocolate and almond, confections with our chocolate. And,
Oh, I like that idea.
we can come up with all kinds of awesome things.
I love this chocolate. This one's delicious.
This is my favorite of everything that we make. This is one of the original bars that we came up with in Mexico. Obviously using Mexican cacao and almonds from a different source, but this is still my absolute favorite bar. I mean, I grew up loving that Hershey bar with almonds, even though when I was little, I loved my chocolate with a little salt with it. And that's why all of our chocolate has a little pinch of sea salt in it. But literally going to the movies as a kid in the 1970s, I would get a big buttered salted popcorn and break a Hershey bar into it so I could have that salted butter flavor with my overly sweet Hershey bar.
Oh my gosh. Well, should we taste a wine or talk about another chocolate?
Let's taste some wine.
Okay, so the next wine that we have in this flight is the 2017 Cabernet, the Dry Creek Valley Cabernet. And this is the real sort of classic Dry Creek Vineyard Cabernet. It is absolutely, the sort of the standard for us in that it's all 5 Bordeaux varietals. It's 80% Cabernet. And in this case, it has quite a bit of Merlot, 15% Merlot. Then 2% Cabernet Franc. Again, the Cabernet Franc is the same as in the first wine. And 2% Malbec, and that's actually from DCV6 across the street from the winery. And then just 1% Petit Verdot, which for those of you, I'm thinking kind of Paul and Sandra, you were on the Endeavor hike last weekend. The Petit Verdot is from that particular vineyard. So that's a very kind of, I would say a classic or very typical blend for us for our Dry Creek Valley Cabernet Sauvignon. It's been aged for 17 months in French oak, and so not a lot of new oak. We don't want to have it overly oaky. We try to be very judicious, but about a third of it or 30% is in new French oak. Of course, you'll get that fabulous black cherry kind of boysenberry fruit tones. I get a little bit of a little more of a savory kind of tone. I don't know, some kind of a savory spice. I'm not really, the exact one isn't coming to my brain right this moment, but Maybe a little bit of tobacco, like sweet pipe tobacco. I have an uncle who is actually a doctor, and he smokes a pipe every day, which I never quite figured out. But nonetheless, it smells really good, and there's a little tiny bit of that in this. But this is a really, I think, a very good example of, you know, kind of that elegant, kind of multi-layered Cabernet. This is not a highly tannic Cabernet. It's just a beautifully balanced, elegant Cabernet. And I want to stop talking so I can eat some more chocolate with it.
So the next one I think we should try with this. This is our beautiful 62%. It's our dark milk chocolate with figs, hazelnuts, and almonds.
I'm really intrigued by that one.
It's so amazing. And just a quick little show, all of the art on our bar, on our labels, are from quilts, and you can see quilts all around us. These were done by Jeff's aunt, and this you can actually see comes from right there.
Love it. I love it. That's great.
So one of the great things about this, so it still has that same base of the browned butter and the caramelized milk, but we also make this, we add toasted and hazelnuts to it. And we grind that into the chocolate. So we're making kind of like our own Nutella.
You're getting that infusion of really rich roasted hazelnut flavor all the way through the chocolate.
As well as little pieces of hazelnut, almond, and then these wonderful dried figs.
So I just cheated and I just tasted the Mariner with that, and I like that a lot. Robert, what about you?
I have been fully cheating, and this is the same thing I did when we originally tasted this. I've been literally tasting each one of these chocolates with each one of these wines, and finding that some of them go well with particular wines, and a lot of them go well and really accommodate and bring out flavors in all of the wines. So it's a really nice. I think that's why we got excited about this tasting. It wasn't that it was so specific, like this goes with that. It was more like all of this in one way or another goes with our Bordeaux wines. So yeah, I've been cheating and getting way ahead.
So I sort of have it's probably a dumb question, but maybe someone else on this call has the same question. When you're taking a bite of chocolate, like my inclination is to kind of take a big bite. Are you supposed to take a little nibble bite? And you know, how do I bite it? And how much should I bite off? I happen to have them all broken up into little squares, right?
How do you drink fine wine?
I sip. So, okay, so that's really good. So we should be taking little nibbles then.
So
we should not be inhaling our chocolate. My whole life, I've inhaled my chocolate, okay?
You like customers like you.
Yeah, buy more chocolate. You can truly, it's like when people ask, what's the best thing to pair this with? And it's food that you like to pair it with.
Mm-hmm.
So eat it however you want.
You know, we think that every household should have a supply of chocolate on hand so that every night you could just break off a little square and just have that, you know, at the end of dinner as you're finishing your wine that you had with dinner, you know, just a little square of chocolate to kind of continue that, you know, experience past dinner. And all of our bars break into 10 squares. So if you had one bar of Volo at your house on the ready, you know, almost got, you know, a week and a half worth of bites per person.
If you live alone.
If you live alone.
I love that. I'm curious if anybody is doing that. You guys have to let us know if anybody's having a little nibble of chocolate every night, because if you are, you're living well. That's good. And if you are, you know, this is a good thing. Our new resolution for 2020 is we should all be having a little tiny bit of chocolate every single night, right?
A little wine. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's
so speaking of the wine, the next one, of course, is a personal favorite, and that's the Mariner. And this is the wine that, I don't know, it really it almost kind of evokes a little bit of emotion for me, because this is the wine that really was sort of the turning point in our red wine evolution here at the winery. And It is our classic Meritage. It's kind of our big guns Meritage, if you will, in that it's more Cabernet driven. We also produce a Meritage that's more Merlot driven, but this is the more Cabernet driven one. And this particular vintage is 69% Cabernet and 15% Merlot, and then a little bit of Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, Malbec. So you're gonna notice this is a deeper, darker wine in terms of color, and also just in terms of sort of overall structure than the first two wines. The vineyards are really kind of our most prized estate and sort of hillside vineyards. So pretty, you know, fairly steep terrain, obviously all hand-picked, et cetera, et cetera. Also aged for just under 20 months, about 18 months in a combination of French oak and European barrels. But I'd love to know when you guys were doing this tasting the last time, Robert, was there, I know we're not supposed to like be picking a wine with a chocolate, but was there anything in particular that you thought tasted really well with this?
There was all kinds of mixed stuff. The chocolate mocha, and then the 73 deep dark chocolate, the one that we started with, was kind of a baseline across almost all the wines. There was two different camps about the 65% chocolate mocha. I thought that it really brought out some of the sort of coffee and toasty oak aromatics and flavors that I sometimes get with the Mariner, and other people disagreed with me. And that's one of the great things about any kind of food and wine pairing is that, you know, we talk about this all the time. It's about your personal opinion. When you're home enjoying food and wine, you don't have to impress anybody. It's your stuff, you know, and so whatever you like with it. So for me, I was gravitating back to the Merlot. The Merlot has been a thread through almost all of these wines. And then also the Mariner, definitely.
Yeah.
And that was on the 65% chocolate mocha.
So the mocha is made, instead of it being a milk chocolate, it's a cream chocolate. So we don't add milk to it, we add cream and a little bit more cinnamon, and into this, we literally grind coffee into it.
That's the 65% chocolate mocha? Where do you get your coffee beans? Or
This Flying Goat in Healdsburg.
oh, Flying Goat in Healdsburg, that's good. Keep it local.
Yes. So the beans, the coffee beans and the cocoa beans go into the grinder at the same time. So this coffee, part of this bar is made up of physical coffee beans. I mean, they are refined completely into the chocolate.
You don't use that same contraption that you showed us before, do you?
You actually get the coffee ground. We could probably use that if we got really into coffee. You know, having that little additional cinnamon in the mocha, I really like this with Mariner as I was tasting that, you know, that kind of dry spice of the cinnamon that comes through more in the mocha. I think that was, for me, that was a really tasty Mariner.
Well, you know, one of the things that strikes me, and you know, I'm always thinking about when we're cooking or when we're entertaining, what would be an easy, nice dessert, right? If you've gone to the trouble of making, you know, a really lovely meal, sometimes you don't have the energy to actually make a dessert on top of it, but you feel, you know, that you need to serve something. And of course, oftentimes we'll select cheese. But just the idea of having these little squares of chocolate sort of artfully arranged on a little plate is a really wonderful way to finish up a meal. And I don't do that. And I'm going to start doing that now.
So you mentioned cheese. One of the greatest pairings, this is the trifecta, is chocolate, cheese, and wine together. So pairing cheese and chocolate, for each of our bars, we actually have 2 recommended cheese pairings.
Oh my gosh, do tell.
So, and they're listed on our website, but imagine, just think chocolate cheesecake, but you're using the best chocolate and the best cheese. And so this is a real great way to very easily have, you know, cheese on hand at your house, have chocolate on hand. You take a little bite of cheese, a little bite of chocolate, come back to the cheese, and it all comes together. But also, you can find that cheese can help chocolate pair with challenging wines. Cheese can help be the bridge between some wines that may not go great with some chocolate. And truly our favorite, and this goes back to our dark milk, 62% with olive oil roasted almonds, paired with Mount Tam, a triple cream brie, brie type cheese, cow's milk, really, creamy and ripe. That is one of the most sublime pairings that you can have. And it's truly our favorite.
And then a mind-blowing one, we've not tried this bar yet. And it's the chocolate, dark chocolate, cream chocolate with little bits, beautiful flakes of honeycomb toffee.
So yeah.
Ooh, is that the one we're doing next?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us about this caramel crunch.
So this is similar to the mocha, where we have the cream in the chocolate, 70% chocolate using the cacao from Haiti. We add a little bit of cream, and then we make a honeycomb type toffee. And now honeycomb toffee doesn't mean that's made with honeycomb, but it means that we make a dark toffee and we aerate it with, we get bubbles in it. And that gives you a toffee that's not like a shard of glass. I mean, it's a very crunch. And it gives that dark kind of almost, caramel that's pushing the edge of like a little bit of bitterness. But and it also gives you that texture. And this is our number second best selling bar that we have.
Ooh, yummy. That's delicious.
This one paired with a sweet gorgonzola is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to steal all these ideas because, I'm all about easy at the end of a meal. And I love great desserts, but I don't ever have the energy or the time to make one. So this is going to be my new thing. Gorgonzola with the chocolate caramel crunch. And then you said the triple creme with which one?
So the dark milk with the almonds,
Yep.
with the brie type cheese. So triple cream cheese.
Like, would you do like a Saint Andre, something like that, or is that too rich?
Yeah. No, there's really, you can self-moderate if your cheese is really rich. Maybe I'm not that great at self-moderating.
I'm not very good at self-moderating. Who is good? I don't think any of these people are very good at self-moderating.
I think the cheese that they actually used as an example was the Cowgirl Creamery Mount Tam, and that's actually a cheese we have. I'm not saying anything really, but it's actually just like right out there in the refrigerator.
Oh gosh. Okay, good to know.
All of these pairings are listed on our website. If you go to where the individual bar is listed, we list there what the pairings are.
And what we offer 2 cheeses, suggested pairings per bar. One that's a Northern California cheese or local cheese, and one that you could find pretty much anywhere else in the country, either an import or a larger cheese. So it's easy to find cheese and chocolate. And there's really, once you start pairing cheese and chocolate, you can create your own kind of pairings, because there are very few cheeses that don't work with chocolate. I mean, there's varying degrees of how great they are, but almost all cheese and all chocolate, works together at a point.
So Jeff, you're a chef and a former restaurateur. How come restaurants don't serve cheese and chocolate? I mean, I've eaten at thousands of restaurants literally all over the world, some of the finest in the world, and I don't think I've ever been served cheese and chocolate. Simple, just like that.
That's our mission right now, is to get restaurants that offer a cheese plate. There's always some kind of a compote, a fruit compote, and maybe a little, random things. A little square dark chocolate. We're trying to get the word out, and this was nothing that we came up with. We were asked to participate in the Artisan Cheese Festival a couple years ago, and Laura Werlin, who writes books on cheese, very famous cheese educator, she did a cheese and chocolate seminar, and she used our dark milk almond with Mount Tam, and that was like opened our eyes up to like, wow, this is amazing.
It's kind of a big secret. I feel like I've been let in on a secret, and I'm thinking about here in Healdsburg, all the restaurants that we know and love. I can't think of one single one that serves something like this.
No, we're trying to get that mode, that moving forward. But it's truly, it's so easy. It's just the right cheese. Having the chocolate with it. is truly something that you can have at home. So on the, you know, put together in like
have it available. Yeah. And everybody who's on this, if you guys I'd be very curious if you have a restaurant in your area that actually serves a cheese and chocolate, you know, dish. I'd be really curious. Anyway, so the last wine that we selected for all of these chocolates is our Benchland Meritage. And this is a really, really special wine. This is a wine that it kind of culminates literally 5 decades of working here in Dry Creek Valley and trying different varietals and different vineyards and different regions, and recognizing that, you know, there's different microclimates and soils, or what we say is terroir, within this tiny valley that we're so lucky to be located in. And so this particular blend, it's a Meritage, is 59% Cabernet, and then it has a good dollop of the Cabernet Franc, that beautiful Loire clone of Cabernet Franc, and then just a tiny bit of Malbec, again from the Endeavor Vineyard. But the vineyards are, we're calling it Benchland because it's, if you're driving up Dry Creek Road, so going from the south to the north, these are the vineyards that are on the eastern side of the valley, essentially due north of here. If you kind of go past the Dry Creek General Store and go for another mile or so, we're getting into that kind of Benchland area. And we were talking about this earlier today, or Tim and I were talking about it earlier today, because we were looking at one of our vineyards that we harvest from there, and the soil tends to be kind of this loose, flaky, almost loamy soil, but it can be it's a little more vigorous, not overly vigorous, but just really produces kind of very nicely elegant, balanced wines. These are vineyards that are facing the west side of the valley, right? So they're getting kind of the afternoon sun, so they get nice and ripe. But there's something about the soil that we just think that there's a distinctiveness to the grapes grown on that side and that area of the valley. So hence this whole concept of the terroir series wines, which is this is one of the 3 that we produce, where we're kind of isolating a little specific area within Dry Creek Valley. And similar to the Mariner, this blend, well, similar to all these wines, the blend will change every year. This is only our, I think this is our 2nd year producing this wine. And I've forgotten what the previous blend was, but obviously the next blend will be a little bit different. And in a vintage where perhaps the Cabernet is, you know, really tannic and very grippy, we'll blend in a little bit more of the Cabernet Franc and a little bit more of perhaps we'll add some Merlot. I don't really know, but it'll change. And that's the beauty of these Meritage wines. The art of Bordeaux blending allows us to really produce the very best of the best in any given vintage, regardless of what Mother Nature gives us. And that's why we're so passionate about the art of blending. Similar to prior, this also has the benefit of almost 2 years of aging and about 20 months in French oak barrels, but not all new. Again, we don't want it to be overly oaky, so we're very cautious about that. I find this wine is completely different than the previous 3 wines, and I haven't quite tasted it yet with any of the chocolates, but I am going to do that now. I want to hear about the Mexicali.
That's what we're wolfing down right now.
That was kind of that's kind of the, I don't want to say, not the sleeper, what's the word? Sort of the eye opener, I think.
The dark horse?
Yeah, the dark horse, thank you.
So our Mexicali is, once again, a 70% chocolate. We've got 3 different dried chilies in there, but they're mild. And it's more of a chili flavor than a chili heat that you get. And the heat that you do get is mild, and it comes on the back end. It's really after you're finishing the bite. We also have dried cherries in there. And the dried cherries help temper a little bit of that heat, but really add some, you know, rich kind of like intense, you know, cherry to that. So this bar we won a nice international award for. At the Academy of Chocolate, which is a British chocolate competition. It's a worldwide competition, but it's based in England. And we took a bronze award last year for this bar, and so we were really happy with it. But it's some people might get scared when they see the it's got chilies, but it's truly a mild, you know, slow building, slow burn.
Yeah, if I could chime in here and just say, this was the chocolate that, much like you just said, Jeff, I saw it on the package. I saw chili, and I was like, no, that, you know, begrudgingly I will try this, but I just know it's not going to work. And this was, I think, Kim, you said dark horse. But this was like, this is the chocolate bar that I go and pick up at Big John's and I bring home. And it is, my wife and I do cheese and we do salumis and stuff like that. And we do always have a little chocolate. This is absolutely my favorite. And it is just a clinic on how to use chili. Because you're right, it's not hot. There's the spice pairs really well with the tannin in the wines, just as far as the way it feels on your palate. And then that dried cherry, the fruit on that dried cherry comes through and helps with all of the fruit in the wine. And then the chocolate itself enhances all of those dark black fruits and toasty oak notes of the wine. So this was, I was so pleasantly wrong. And yeah, this is one of my favorites.
So which wine did you like this with?
All of them, literally. I went. So it goes perfectly great with the Benchland. But then I started tasting it. I assumed that in body it was going to have a bigger, richer body just because of the ingredients in it. So I naturally, the first time I tasted it, I went with the heaviest wine that we had at the lineup. But then I worked my way backwards. And those overlying profiles of the spice complementing the tannin and the cherry complementing the red fruit and the chocolate complementing the black fruit, I found was just a nice overlying arc through all of the red wines. So for me, it's a great chocolate bar to have at home. Like I said, on that cheese board with the salamis and whatever, you know, if I'm having Merlot, if I'm having Cab, whatever I'm having, it's a nice complement to that tasting.
I don't know, does anybody get, I actually taste, and maybe this is just my imagination, but almost a little bit of cinnamon in that last chocolate. Do you add cinnamon, or is that from the chili spice, or?
All of our chocolate has cinnamon in it, and that's kind of a very background note. But that we keep that kind of in honor of Mexico. Us learning to make chocolate in Mexico, Mexican chocolate being based on a lot of spice, but especially cinnamon. But this bar has more cinnamon. So
I'm so proud of myself.
The chili is warming, but you're also getting that warmth, dry spice of cinnamon that's coming through too. And that is a real, it just makes this bar like one of my favorites too. So
it's really good. We've got some really good questions, Sarah.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to pop in and interrupt you guys, but I didn't want to. But we had a great question about what is the shelf life of the chocolate?
1 year.
1 year.
Yeah, but you have to remember chocolate, along with paralleling wine and growing and making, think of wine when you store your chocolate. You know, it'll be 1 year if you keep it dark and cool and dry. So not refrigerator, too much humidity, too cold, not, you know, sitting in where sun can hit it in the window. But when it's cared for properly, it can actually, I mean, we put a 1 year expiry, you know, from the time we make it, a 1 year date on it. But it's perfectly fine after 1.5 years, 2 years also.
So Jeff, are you suggesting that we wouldn't be completely out of line to have a chocolate cellar?
Or maybe just a little corner of your wine cellar dedicated to a few bars of chocolate.
Behind me, Robert. It's going to be right behind me in that corner.
Great. Well, does anybody else have any other questions? I know that we've had a couple of head nods, and I know that I've seen a lot of very happy faces right now. So if there's any questions or any favorite combinations, we'd love to hear what you guys are loving. I know that Robert had a question for Kim, wondering kind of about the fires this year affecting the grapes for this year's wine. So I don't know, I'm going to just touch on that quickly before we can get back to our yummy chocolate.
Sure. So the $1 million question. Well, first, the good news. We were not directly impacted, meaning that we didn't have any, you know, fire on any of our vineyards or anywhere near any of our vineyards, because the fires were in the Western Hills behind us. And when I say behind us, I'm pointing to the west side of the valley. So if you go over the bridge, Lambert Bridge, over to West Dry Creek Road, and then in those mountains behind there, a couple of miles, that's where the fires were. so that's the good news. What's happening now is that that first week of the fires, actually when the fires were happening and then the week after, there was virtually no smoke in this area because the smoke was blowing elsewhere. The winds were very favorable, which was, you know, we were very lucky because it kept the fire out of the valley. Then afterwards, and especially as some of these other fires were happening in other parts of California and also, of course, to the north of here in Oregon and Washington, we started to get some of that smoke. And it was in, you know, well, throughout the whole Northern California for quite a long time. So at this point, it's too early to tell. We have not harvested any Cabernet. As I was saying, we brought in all of our whites, and the whites are all fine. In fact, they're all great. One of the things about the whites that works to our advantage is that they're not fermented on the skin, so the smoke impacts the skins of grapes. And so it's really more red wines that can be susceptible. So with white wines, we're in really good shape. So far, the Merlot that we've harvested is in good shape. The Zinfandels are looking, you know, pretty good. We've had to reject a few vineyards, but we're still in the process of getting the test results back from all of the vineyards that we're testing. So as I think I said earlier, we're testing through what's called a micro ferment, every single vineyard, and it's, you know, we're starting to get all those test results back, but everything that we've harvested so far has all been fine, thank goodness. The other thing we're doing that is really important, and it's kind of part of being extra cautious this year, is what we're calling sort of triple sorting, if you will. So in the vineyard, we're sorting it twice before the fruit is even being picked and brought to the winery. So when they actually pick it off the vine and they throw it in the little bin, they sort there. And then there's another guy or gal that sorts before it goes into the gondola. So it's sorted, if you will, or sifted through to pull out any leaves or anything like that, where because the smoke, it's thought that the smoke could maybe be on the leaves. So you want to eliminate any other, you know, things, leaves, etc. So then at the winery, when we harvest or crush the fruit and it gets dumped into the crusher, we have two people standing at the other end of the crusher as the fruit leaves the conveyor belt and pulling off leaves there. So that's the third sorting. And maybe this is a little bit too much information, but it's a technique that we're using this year just to make sure that we don't have, you know, we're just trying to minimize or eliminate, I should say, any possibility. And you know, it's all work in progress, and it's definitely too early to say, but so far everything we've brought into the winery is in really good shape.
Well, so speaking of fermentation, Bruce had a great question for Jeff and Susan about, you mentioned that you are measuring the sugar content of the cocoa bean with a refractometer. How do you actually do that? Are you crushing it and soaking it in water, or how does that process work?
So when the cocoa pod is ripe, it's almost like a cucumber on the inside. There's a seed, you know, the bundle of seeds is surrounded by a pulpy mass. So you're actually measuring the sugar content of this pulpy kind of mass. So that it's really, you know, when cacao is wet, I mean, it looks like giant corn kernels, but or hominy, but they're really in this, you know, really sweet, you know, kind of flesh that's around it.
And it almost tastes like guava.
Yeah,
it's very tropical.
Very tropical. You don't get, when you taste that right at harvest, you don't get any chocolate flavor at all. So whoever figured out you could go from this tropical mango guava flavor to dark chocolate flavor was a genius, because there's a lot of steps in between there. But right from the tree, it's a tropical fruit, basically.
Great, thank you. Well, and Libby had a question for you guys personally. Kind of, when did you graduate from the CIA, and what was your course of studies at CIA Greystone?
Well, so I actually was a CIA Hyde Park, New York. Right. And so I actually, I got my bachelor's at University of San Francisco through the business school, and then went to, I graduated in '93, and then moved to New York and went to CIA. And that was just the general culinary education, and graduated in 1995.
Awesome. So then there's another question of Andrew and Christy. We're wondering, do you guys host any tours or any cheese and chocolate tastings of your own, or how can people get more Volo experience?
So,
How can they become Voloized, like we've become Voloized?
well, yeah, just, reach out to us. We love to give tours. We're happy to do cheese and chocolate pairings.
Socially distanced.
Socially distanced, safe. But we're in a tiny space, and so what we say is give us a call. Let us know if you're going to be out here or if you're near here. We're a very tiny company. There's only 3 of us. Kind of like going back to the early, like probably most wineries started. Unless we're making deliveries, picking up supplies, we're here all the time. So yeah, we invite people to. We love to show off what we do because most people have never seen how a chocolate bar gets made. We go through all the steps.
You know what would be fun is to maybe sometime, I was going to say next year, but I don't want to promise next year, but sometime it'd be fun to do a little, like a Dry Creek tour to you guys and bring a group to your place and learn about it, because I would love to learn too.
We would love it.
Yeah, we would love that. And here's the thing about shifting gears from being chefs to being chocolate makers. Okay, so our whole career in the kitchens meant that when you came home at the end of the night, you smelled like onions, you smelled like the deep fryer, you had restaurant smells that attached to you. When you work in a chocolate factory, and especially if it's a day we've been roasting our cacao, you just smell like brownies that have just been baked or just out of the oven. And we will go to Oliver's Market or Big John's after work to get something for dinner, and literally people will be like, "It smells so good." That's what making chocolate. It's a big shift for us.
I love that.
That's funny. Well, we did have one more great question that I would love for Jeff and Susan to answer before we wrap up. And you were talking about that kind of pulpy matter, when you're talking about the cocoa bean and the fruit. What happens to that? Is that become another product? Does it become waste?
So it's actually the vehicle for the fermentation. So that's where all the sugar is around the bean. So it's that sugary, you think about it, cacao is harvested in a jungle. It's got this sweet pulpy mass. So once you harvest it and you break open the pod, fermentation starts right away. You have the heat of the jungle, you have the wild yeasts, and you have all that sugar surrounding the beans. And so it literally starts to ferment so fast. Susan can tell you about gathering cacao juice.
So what they'll do, you saw the young man that had the pod. So they crack it open, they pull the seeds out, it goes into a netted bag, which they set on, plastic tarps on the ground. And I went over and saw this juice going off, and there was a little dip in the land, but covered with the tarp. And I just scooped the juice and tasted it. It was sublime. So what they'll do is they'll drain that. What's left with the pod, they just leave it on the ground because that's where the pollinators for the cacao like to eat, and they'll breed there. And apparently they're very lazy. They don't like to fly very high up the tree, but they need to have the cacao pods there to feed on and make babies and all that.
And on our trip to Guatemala, she actually took a plastic bag to collect some of this juice that was, fresh right out of the pod, the drained, clear, amazing juice.
I left it overnight in a Jeep.
And by the next morning, this was completely fermented. She had created a cacao, wine basically through the quick, super humid, hot, environment.
Good fermentation.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, with Mark snuck one more question in that I thought was fascinating, and I'm really curious for the answer. And so when we're making wine, we're taking a ton of grapes, and that equals a certain amount of cases and bottles that comes out of it. So if you have 100 pounds of beans, how many bars do you make?
100 pounds.
100 pounds, yeah.
100 pounds of chocolate. So that would be based on our deep dark chocolate. So when you make chocolate and you have the beans and you roast them and you crush them. When you roast them, you have some moisture loss, and then you crush and winnow and you get away the hull. You end up with about a 75% yield. So you have a 75% yield on your original amount. If we're making our 73% chocolate, you know, you're basically adding almost that much sugar back into it, or you know, thereabouts. So if it's like our 73% deep dark, if we started with 100 pounds of beans, we would literally end up with, you know, very close to that amount of chocolate. Totally changes when you're talking about lower percentage cacao bars like the milk chocolate or the mocha.
And each batch that we do is how many pounds?
So right now we do about, each batch is about between 85 and 90 pounds at a time.
And that gives us how many bars?
Hundreds.
And how often do you make a batch?
Every day, all the time, 24.
Yeah. So when we run our machines, they literally go 24 hours a day, and so we're constantly roasting. There's always chocolate in 3 various stages of production at any given time. So we have a warehouse. Part of our unit here is another warehouse where we keep about, I think we have about what, 3 tons of beans right now hanging out in you know, sacks. And we're constantly going through those and roasting. We have chocolate that's refining. We have chocolate that's waiting to be wrapped. We have chocolate that's aging. I mean, there's all different stages of it.
And when it says wrapped, the bars that you see, every single one of these has been wrapped by our employee, Elena. And last year, she hand wrapped 37,000 bars.
Well, I can sort of relate. A long time ago, I used to hand label just about every single bottle that we produced at this winery. I haven't done that in a while, but I can totally relate.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just curious. I don't know if we can unmute people, Sarah, but I'm very curious to hear what the preferred wine was, if there was one, with whatever, you know, if there was like a preference or something that really stood out to you.
Yeah, so I think you guys can unmute yourselves. I don't want to unmute everyone because then it's going to become chaos. We've tried that.
Benchland, the Meritage Benchland.
With chocolate.
Yeah.
The first one, the very first dark chocolate, my favorite.
Anybody else?
I just love
The Mariner was best with all the chocolates.
Was that number 4?
That seemed the most versatile to you.
Yeah, I would do the Meritage Benchland with the Mexicali chocolate. That peppery taste was really good in there. Thank you.
How do we talk?
For the Cabernet Sauvignon.
I know the Pfeiffers want to say something.
Oh, sorry. We thought we were muted.
So half of the group in New Hampshire
Hi. Come over here.
votes for the Mariner. The other half is for the Benchland.
Woo!
I like the one that went with the chocolate.
It was so good. So good. So good.
I thought the Benchland, if I were just going to pick, I would probably say the Benchland seemed to me the most versatile. I don't know quite why, but I don't know, that one stood out to me as well.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Well, listen, everybody, unless there's any other burning questions, I just want to thank everybody for joining us. And Jeff and Susan, thank you so much for not only sharing your chocolates, but educating us. One of the things that just keeps me passionate every year is when we learn new things, right? And that's the beauty of the wine industry. It's the beauty of food. It's the beauty of chocolate. And I know I learned a lot, and I'm going to look at chocolate very differently. And I'm also really excited to have my new go-to after dinner experience. Oh, wait, one thing. We didn't talk about this. I have a question about health and chocolate. I feel like somebody should ask this question. So we all have been told that having a little piece of dark chocolate is good for us, right? Maybe you could just speak to that. Why is that?
So cacao or cocoa chocolate is actually a vasodilator, which means the proponents, the chemicals in it, relax your blood vessels and your veins. Therefore, it actually then lowers your blood pressure.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and I am going to be reporting in about my new vasodilating system.
And the other thing, when you have the chocolate and you feel like you've got almost a euphoric feeling, you're actually getting more blood to your brain because of the chocolate.
Wow, I like that. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us. Thank you, Jeff and Susan, for taking time to share your story with us. And we hope you all understand why we feel so passionate about Volo chocolate and love our partnership with them. I'd like to encourage you to join us for our next couple of tastings. We have our Journeyman Salumi, Journeyman Meat Company are going to be having 5 of their salumi paired with our wines, our Zinfandel focus, and that is October 29th. And then we also have a Thanksgiving themed virtual tasting coming up with 3 of our wines that are perfect for Thanksgiving. And that one will have our winemaker, Tim Bell. And that one will also feature our concierge and wine educator, Darren Abel, for those of you who love and miss seeing Darren. So we have really some fun things coming up. We're also planning next year's virtual tastings because we really love seeing all of you and want to keep this going. So if you have any suggestions, I know a couple of you have sent me your thoughts already. So please, send me your thoughts, send me your ideas. What do you like? What do you want more of? And we will do our best to bring these fun experiences to you in your home. So thank you everyone again so much. It's great to see you all, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.